Rash.
Excellent.
There you go. So thank you, Dr. Knight, for agreeing to be on Rash's World. Welcome to Rash's World. So this is a blog where I talk about various things, mostly philosophy, but I'm a huge fan of psychology. And so especially now, what's happening with COVID, there's a lot of questions about it and lots of changes that are going to be associated with it. I'm also very interested in what in your research, and you are from identity realization consultancy. I like both of those items. Both identity and realization are important to me. And so, yeah, the first thing I think I've noticed is that a happy employee is one who is independent, autonomous. And would you
That's
agree
right.
with that completely?
Yes, of course. You're quite right to this happiness. I mean, we've been looking at this, you mentioned identity realization, this kind of stuff now for 17 years. And the latest piece of research that we've done was focusing on people that were, well, hopefully successful at working from home and how they contrast with people that weren't. And we found that happiness was absolutely key. And happiness was founded upon three pillars in this case. And that was, as you quite rightly say, autonomy. People needed to feel they were in control of what was going on. But also a network, two types of networks. One, to be in contact with networks of friends and relatives and people that meant something to them. But also to remain in contact with people from work. So, you know, we talk about this thing called social distancing, which is a dreadful term. We should really talk about physical distancing, not social distancing,
I agree with
because we need as much social interaction as we can possibly find. And that is a message we can take back to work with us. You know, we know that what people need when they go back. We know it's been working for them when they're at home, and the two things can feed from one another.
Now, with working at home, one thing that has changed, and that's happened to me too, thanks to COVID, I'm working at home. My first reaction was I was terrified because of using technology, of not being able to use Zoom. And now I've been practicing it quite a bit, and I actually love it because what I've noticed, it's actually broadened my horizons. And so I've seen a talk by Ben Pring, who works with this, and he's been using technology for his work for 20 odd years, and he's saying, finally, you guys are coming to my world. So I'm wondering how COVID has actually done a shift, a digital era transformation, that where we notice and realize the potential of Zoom, and which is also me having an interview with you on the other side of the world, which wasn't really possible
I think
before.
you've hit a very good point there. And there are two things about Zoom. One, you're quite right, it's empowering. I mean, I've been lucky enough to have beers with people in Australia thanks to Zoom, which of course I would never have done before. And that's fantastic stuff. And yeah, I'm having more to do with the States than I have at any time in the last, 10 years, I guess, which also is good. But we need to be careful all the same. Zoom is a substitute, and a very good substitute time for face-to-face conversations, but it is not an alternative to it. All right. What we need is a mix of the two. I mean, you and I, if we were working together, most of the time this is fine. But every now and again, if you're part of a team, you really do need to be in the same space. The social interaction, the physical interaction with people, the clink of a glass, whatever it is really important. And that's why we speak about the workplace. And what the workplace needs to be is a resource. So people are great at working from home. As you say, people were very nervous at the start. They were tentative about new technologies. But now, as they go back to the workplace, the office, whatever kind of space you work in, needs to be somewhere where you go to touch base, to pick stuff up, to learn things, to train, and above all, to have an experience, have a really positive experience. Because what COVID's showing us through the use of technology is that we don't need to be monitored. We don't need to be surveilled all the time, which is what goes on in many workplaces. We can be trusted to get on with it. And that when we do, we adjust our own patterns, and really we can get on with it quite well.
And there's the term of hierarchy, which I've never heard before, but a kind of like system where basically you're moving away from the hierarchy where you have the boss at the top, and it's becoming more like kind of like smaller teams, like coaches, basically, facilitators who oversee smaller groups. Do you think that is a good idea, that we're moving in that direction, or should be moving in that direction?
I'm an old cynical person. I like to say skeptical, but probably cynical is quite a good word sometimes. People have been reinventing things in the workplace for a very long time. And we've had a flat structure, to use a different terminology, for quite a while. And what you've just described is very similar to a chap called Tom Peters. And what he described as the bowl of spaghetti, which is a brilliant, brilliant analogy a few years ago, which is whereby you have a mix of people. And if you are an expert, you're at the top of the bowl of spaghetti, getting support from people underneath. And if somebody else is the expert, you then go underneath that bowl and you then provide the support. So expertise calls on support as needed and leads the way when required. And I think that speaks quite well to how flexible, responsive organizations can be. It's not new. It hasn't come about because of COVID-19. It's always been there. It depends on how trusting, want a better term, a company's prepared to be to do away with the hierarchical structure.
And what about employees who are segmenters and integrators, those two terms, which I find quite interesting. I think this, for integrators, this working at home should be just wonderful, because you say, this is my home and I don't see a separation between work and my life. Whereas others who like to they keep it strictly business and say, okay, this is my cubicle and that's it. And I go out and I'm free. So how have you done research about the differences between the two strategies of dealing with work, and what would be some of the findings, or what's your impression about that?
You know, that's a really interesting point. People look all the time for differences between how people work at home and people in the office and how people struggle. And people will say, oh, it's an introversion, extroversion thing. It's a millennial thing. It's a male, female thing. And when we've been doing all our work, and again, over all the years, it is almost always the case that there is no difference, no significant difference between people. None. What matters is that people have these things at the start, the autonomy to work in their space, resource and trust. Those are autonomy, resource and trust in this case. Now, where those things are lacking, be you 18 and fresh into work, or as I know, a chap who is in his mid-80s and still working, both of those people will either thrive or not. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, if you have resource, autonomy and trust, you're doing okay. If you don't, you won't. So companies, to try and retain control over their staff, will say, oh, well, we'll look after you because you're this personality, or you're you're a starter, you're a finisher, you're whatever. It's not necessary. What you need to do is trust the people that work for you, and things are a whole lot better.
It goes back to agency. I had, through Zoom again, I had the opportunity to see Dr. Martin Seligman talk about agency and the idea of efficacy, and you are making a difference. You are actually in control, and that leads to positive psychology, and it leads to health benefits and productivity and all that. So it's my question is, why don't employers utilize that? Why haven't they done this? It's always like, I'm at the top and you do as I say, even if it's design of the office and everything, we decide and there you go and you deal with it. Why don't they realize it's for their own benefit?
That's the thing. Yes, indeed. So Seligman's brilliant, isn't it? I'm a big fan of Seligman. He's absolutely top shot. What happened quite a long time ago, it dates back. I'll give you a good example. It's not particularly this person, but he's typical of it. A time ago, there was a guy called Frederick Taylor. And Frederick Taylor split up values of production. So complicated jobs in the steel industry became very simple jobs. That meant that the knowledge became vested in the manager, because they knew what was going on. They could control the simple facets of production. And offices really liked that idea, because clerks were very expensive people. They were coffers of information that managers had to defer to in order to get stuff done. So by splitting the clerk's job up into, filing, marketing, and accounts and sales, all these different factors, that let managers have a say and understanding of what was going on. And we developed what's called the helicopter view. And managers liked that power. The managers thought that they were, almost, if you look at things like Dilbert, for example, or you look at the readings of people like Baldry, Bain and Taylor, you'll find that managers seem to put themselves as an involved species who know better. And nobody deliberately goes out to muck up their company. But managers think it is their right to control other people's lives. And really it isn't. The US is better than the UK. It's a far more productive, organized, far more productive society than the UK. And it's certainly the case in the UK that managers are responsible for most of the sluggishness in the economy. Britain is a very badly managed office workplace. I don't think the US is that much better, but it certainly has a better performance than we do. And until managers learn that they are not there to tell people what to do, they are there to help people perform to their best, we're never going to get over that obstacle. And that's the important thing. You shouldn't be saying, do this, do that, monitor that, do as you're told. You should be saying, what help do you need? How can I assist? And that isn't a case of being soft. I mean, we're not saying reduce the targets. We're just saying stop treating people like kids and giving them swings and, I don't know, slides to go between floors and stuff. Give them what they need to do the job.
How much of this is mindset? Because I sense, and I've worked for different companies too. I'm an instructor, and so with teaching is even more complicated because I'm the one who is actually teaching and has the experience and expertise, whereas most in our case we're a private university, so their background is more business. And so the decisions are made where it's not in consultancy with us in many cases. And so to what extent do you think this is the mindset of the employer saying, well, the people working for me are lazy. We need to keep pushing them, of like not trusting them, you know? Do you think that is partly the reason for it?
To an extent, Arash, yes, I do think that we need a proper mind shift, a sea change in how things are done in organisation. Now, hopefully, COVID will be the catalyst for that. We've had other opportunities to do it, and we've blown it, but so let's hope we can do it right this time. Because, as I said, nobody goes out to deliberately muck up their companies. But I'll give you an example that comes from management schools. There's Six Sigma, which you may have heard of, or the philosophy of lean, right, which has 5 pillars of control. And they concentrate on eradication of waste and on the eradication of error. Now, when you do both of those things, you muck stuff up. And lean, for example, with its ideas of control and surveillance and standardization and mineralist workspaces, has no scientific support in any discipline whatever. You would not put an ant in a lean jam jar or a gorilla in a lean cage because they suffer and eventually die. We are similar, but we exist in a business bubble that largely ignores a lot of science that goes on. There's a brilliant chap you may have heard of in business called Charles Handy, who said the business is full of very intelligent people doing remarkably stupid things, and we have to stop that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of the things we forget often now with this shift with technology and so on, we assume that the old way of doing things was the better way or best way, but we often fail to see the downsides of working in the office. And one of the upsides is here in my office, which is my home, I have a bonsai tree, I have my mini water fountain, and I feel like, and you've done research on this, I think you said it increases productivity by 16%, I think I've seen. And so now I'm in my home, in my place, so should that not be beneficial of being out of the office? Do you think overall, does that have, for everyone involved, like regardless of differences we might have of dealing with work, don't you think that could be a beneficial aspect of COVID that's coming out now?
Again, I think you're getting a very interesting point. And people are now working from home who would not have worked from home before. And some of those people are people who had very little control over how they work and where they operate in their office. And for them, I think precisely so, suddenly working from home can be a revelation. They can suddenly find out, yes, I can have the tree up and I can have the window open for crying out loud. I can get some air in the place. I can even have a pet sitting by the side of me. And all of that stuff, they suddenly realize how good work can be, how a drudge can be something good. And we need to take those lessons.
Sorry, no more commutes, which
no more commutes. Isn't that a great thing? And so suddenly, and if companies do this, and if they, again, treat people like grown-ups, they say, well, look, we know that the office is an important resource, but we also know how good working from home can be. So they sit down and we say, well, how can we do this? So people, I don't know, let's just say, suddenly people are doing, let's say 2 days at home and 3 days in the office or something like that. Then that gives them the best of both worlds. It lets the company save on space, and it means people are happier. And when people are happier, they're more productive. And as you say, we use lean as our control, the condition I mentioned before. And when you let people develop their own space, even if they develop exactly the same space, and some people do like the minimalist, but they're up to 32% more productive. So it's not necessarily the space, It's how that space is used. And as a quick aside, your bonsai tree, for example, that can be good or bad. I can take away your pension rights, saying no holidays and no creche, but here's a tree to make up for it. And that tree becomes a totem of nastiness. But usually it's a nice thing to have about the place. So yeah, all of this.
Yeah, and it's because that I feel this is my space, so I do have control over it. Whereas in the office space, you have to have permission. It's like, may I bring my bonsai tree? You know, so and that just opens up many things. And again, I can here. I've actually been entrusted to do an online course for our college, and which is just terrifying. But also very rewarding because I feel in control and I feel they trust me with it, which is a wonderful feeling. And so, and it's also the move. This is the first time we're offering an online course. So the shift from, yes, we can use online courses and people all over the world can do it on their own time, the flexibility that comes with it for students. So it's not just here the workers, we're also looking at students who can take advantage of this new phenomenon. And online courses have existed for a long time, but I think now people are taking it more seriously.
I hope so. I hope people take advantage of the situations that are open to them, and I hope that they're made more available by companies. Because you're right to refer to your space and feeling at home as it isn't. And the reason that we call the company identity realization is because we found that's key. If you can realize your identity in your space, wherever that may be, you know, that's a bit of a Rush there, that's a bit of Craig, I recognize that there, then that's a good space. If your space is stamped over with somebody else's identity, that's a far less good space. And as you're saying, working from home for many people can be a great place to be.
Just a question for you. I was interested, I found it interesting to see that you were working for, you were interested in office design previously, and now you're mixing it with psychology. So how do you feel about your own office space?
It's I have a look over my shoulder here. I quite like it. I mean, I work in a shed. You know, if I flick it around, let me have a look. There you are. That's the view from the window. So I look at a shed in the middle of Scotland, basically where I work from. And I like it. If I flick around, I've got my little guitar. I've got the odd bit of plant around the place, and pictures. It's kind of like me. It's a bit scruffy and disorganised, and it makes me happy. So it's a lovely spot. But you forced me in something else, and I wouldn't like it as much.
Mm-hmm. And you have freedom to arrange it any way you like in your place. Okay.
Yes, I'm a fairly rubbish boss, but I will let myself do the odd bit of arrangement. Yeah,
that's wonderful. Yeah, and I think that's again that's very important for how we are progressing in terms of the future of work. And I think it's really also coming down to utilizing the strengths of your employees, of finding out what are they good at and letting them do that. So it's my interest of saying, I didn't know I like technology as much as I do now, and I'm taking advantage of that. And I was given free rein, which I thought was a very good move from my employers to give me that space. And so is it more, do we have to kind of understand our employees better, find out what they're good at, what they're not good at, and find positions that are best suited for them? Is that would that be a good way of approaching work?
Very, very much so. Again, management is crucial in all of this. Management can either open the floodgates or stop them through their actions. And we mentioned autonomy, resource, and trust. We've mentioned the resource, which showed us that along with autonomy, their networks are important to them. And the more that people have access to that, the better. And the more that managers take time to understand the people that work for them, the better. You know, they can see what kind of space people like. They can see what they like to work with. And you obviously like technology. So if somebody was your boss and they let you get on with working with technology, that would be good. That would appeal to you. If somebody says, no, we've got to do it the old-fashioned way because that's where we've always done it, that would impede your development of the organization. You would be less happy. So it goes back to that autonomy thing again. How do you work best? And finding spaces for you to do it. And sometimes that means that people don't fit into the organization because they're in the wrong block, they're in the wrong space. Those people need to be helped to find something that does work for them. And that's the benefit of everybody. But I say, if managers control those levers and they make sure that people have those things, they found that they have more easily managed staff, happier staff, and more productive staff. Everybody can go home earlier.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I'm also curious about social behavior and also behavior at work post-COVID. I mean,
Mm,
I was reading at the beginning when they started talking about the pandemic, and they said like, and social scientists said, and social psychologists said that it depends how long we have to be in this state, but if it's for a longer time, a longer period, these are behaviors that we probably will get used to and we can't shake off. So one thing I'm a bit perhaps worried about is the being afraid of others and
mm.
keeping that distance, whether even if we go back to normal, that it's like I wouldn't want people to come too close to me, that people that are not in my bubble. Do you think that is like something that we will carry on into the future world after we deal with this pandemic? Do you think it will have any consequences on our behavior?
We're human, Arash. Absolutely, we will. People will be very nervous about these people near the social, or some people will. And it will take time to readjust, just it takes time to adjust. And some people do it quite quickly. I mean, I don't know what it's like in the US at the moment, but at the moment in the UK, we're loosening off some of the shackles a little bit. So we can go to cafes, we can go to bars, but we have to sort of make sure that we are a distance away from people. There are perspex screens being set up, and still people can sit there looking a little nervous. Now, when the time comes to move those perfect screens all together, people are going to be even more nervous.
Hmm.
And some people at the moment are just eschewing going to places like that altogether. And that, in the long run, will be to their detriment. But for the moment, I think it's really important we go through this really uncertain time that people need to feel as comfortable as they can. And that is why some social interaction is so hideous, because we need to make sure that the social support is there for everybody, be it as we're doing now in terms of Zoom, because people feel safer talking to Zoom, or whether people want to go in a cafe where people are. The social element is crucial while we retain the physical distancing. And at the end of all of this, we'll just come together again. It'll take some people longer than it'll take others.
One of the things that is missing in the workplace too is the random encounter where you run into somebody, whereas now everything is like scheduled. So I'm going to have a meeting with you, and where I'm missing that. That's one thing I'm missing from the old way of working, where I would go to the water fountain and run into another person that I haven't seen in a while, and we chat with each other. You can't really do that. You can't reproduce that in an online environment, I feel. And I'm missing that. That is something I do miss.
Well, exactly. And that was, I think we touched on that earlier in the conversation when we were talking about Zoom will not replace face-to-face interaction. It can't. It can do bits for it from time to time. It'll stand in for it, and it's very useful in certain circumstances, but it won't do all of it. And it also speaks to our research, the research that came out recently, where people need their workplace colleagues. They need the social and physical interaction with those people. And it goes back to the workplace being a resource. Some people will be able to do without that resource longer than others, but everybody will need the workplace as a resource from time to time. And we must not forget that. The office will not be dead. The office may or may not change, and please God, it does change. It needs to change in some big ways, but we'll certainly need it for all the points that you just made there.
I think a hybrid would be best once we go back to normal. So you work at home and you have your social gathering or get together with colleagues or meetings even face to face. I think that would be, that I would see that as ideal. And the other benefit of working at home, they are talking now about the 4-day week. And so that is something you can do when you're working at home. You can arrange it in a way that I'm going to have 3 days off, and that flexibility, that being independent in that respect, I think is very important too. And just one more point, White, the good side of COVID again, and this goes to my wife, she's a nurse. And so she's very pleased that when you go to a restaurant, things are disinfected in the tables and cutlery and so on. And she is shocked that it wasn't the case before. She was like, why did they not do that before? But thank goodness, that might be some of these good habits that we're going to acquire thanks to COVID, I would think. Also at the workplace.
So.
No?
I certainly hope that's the case. I mean, our gender Arash can be quite filthy and disgusting sometimes, particularly. I'm not saying as a human species can be a little bit mucky, but men in particular, I seem to think. And if we can learn better washroom habits, for example, Wouldn't that be a good thing for all of us?
Yes, yes. I think that's another thing that's come out that is beneficial from this horrible disease. But I am quite optimistic about it. I think that things will get better, but we do have to go through the mud and through the tunnel, if you like.
Yeah.
But there is something good coming out of this. Do you share those views, or are you a bit more pessimistic, or maybe more realistic than me?
Like I say, all right, let's say I'm skeptical rather than cynical. Right? The world of work, for example, has had the opportunity to reform itself on a number of occasions. You know, we've been through world wars, we've been through banking crises, all kinds of opportunities that have lasted longer than this. And so far, we haven't taken those opportunities. If we take some of the chances presented to us, and you've highlighted some of the things in your questions here, such as technology, such as freedom, such as cleanliness, that being able to do your own thing, if we take advantage of those, then yes, we could have a superb place to work. But it is entirely predicated upon management realizing that they do not hold all the cards and do not have all the answers. That belongs in the people that work for them, and it is their job to help them achieve it, not tell them what to do.
But I think we also understand now it's really important to speak up and to stand up for one's rights. And we're seeing it like going throughout the world with all these movements and so on. So perhaps that could be something to look at. Maybe also in terms of unions, of having demanding things like we want autonomy and put that on the list, not just the salary increases, but we want happiness, we want well-being.
Well, hopefully, but again, see, the problem is that while we want autonomy might be great now, the people that want autonomy, but then, we'd like a bit of power next, thank you very much, then the autonomy people underneath them goes bust. That's what's happened in the past. Yeah. So, yes, let's remember that everybody needs autonomy as we start to climb the greasy pole. Yeah, let's hope so.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much
for
taking time to talk to me. It's such an enlightening conversation, and I will post our conversation, the information that I've gathered on my website, on my blog. But it's just been such an honor to talk to you, and thank you for all the great work you're doing. And
Rash, it's been a pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Bye bye for now. You too.
Talk to you soon. Take care. Thank you.